The silence was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't a peaceful silence, the kind you cultivate with a good book and a cup of tea. No, this was a loud, echoing, and profound silence that seemed to swallow the very essence of our home. It was the sound of my daughter, Chloe, being gone. Just hours before, we'd stood in the driveway, wrapped in a hug that felt like it had to last a lifetime. The scent of her shampoo, something sweet like coconut, still lingering on my sweater. My husband, David, had squeezed my shoulder, his own eyes suspiciously bright, and said, "She's ready, Kelly." But was I? As I stood in the doorway of her now immaculate bedroom, a room that had been a whirlwind of clothes, textbooks, and art supplies for the past 18 years, it felt less like a launch and more like a loss. The carefully packed boxes by the door weren't just filled with her things, they were filled with my purpose. For 2 decades, my life had been a symphony of packed lunches, science projects, soccer games, and late-night heart-to-hearts. Now, the conductor had left the building and the music had stopped. This wasn't just an empty nest, it was an empty future. Or so I thought. We'd planned the perfect send-off. A family breakfast with blueberry pancakes, her favorite. The car was packed with surgical precision, a Tetris game of dorm essentials we'd been collecting since May. The 200-mile drive to her university was a mix of nostalgic stories, practical advice I'd repeated a dozen times, and a playlist of her childhood favorites she'd ironically titled Mom's Cringe Mix. But nothing prepares you for the moment. The campus was a buzzing hive of frantic parents and excited freshmen. We found her dorm, a predictably cinder block rectangle, and helped her haul her life inside. There were introductions to a bubbly roommate named Maya, the assembly of a wobbly bookshelf, and the making of a bed with new sheets that smelled of industrial packaging instead of home. And then it was time. The clock, which had seemed to move so slowly all day, suddenly sprinted. We walked her back outside to the car for one last hug. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows. This was it, the emotional farewell moment I'd been dreading for months. "Okay, sweetie," David said, his voice thick. "Call us when you're settled. Love you." He hugged her tight, then, wisely, slid into the driver's seat to give us a moment. Chloe turned to me, and I saw it. Not just the young woman, my brilliant daughter, but the ghost of the little girl who used to cling to my leg at the playground. Her eyes, the same hazel as my father's, welled up. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I'm scared." And in that moment, every cliché I'd ever rolled my eyes at became my profound truth. My heart didn't just ache, it felt like it was being physically rewired. The air left my lungs. This was the culmination of every sleepless night, every worried drive to the doctor, every Band-Aid I'd kissed, every dream I'd whispered to her while she slept. It was all for this moment. To build a human so full of love and courage that she could stand on this precipice, admit her fear, and jump anyway. I cupped her face in my hands, my thumbs wiping away the tears that traced the same paths mine had taken decades before. "Oh, my darling girl," I said, my voice a tremulous thing. "You can do hard things. You are your mother's daughter. Now go be brilliant." I pulled her into a final fierce hug, imprinting the feel of her, the sound of her quiet sobs against my shoulder, into my very soul. Then I let go. I got in the car. I didn't look back as we drove away, because I knew if I saw her standing there alone, I would have run back and kidnapped her. David reached over and held my hand, his grip saying everything his voice couldn't. The drive home was a silent movie of my own memories playing against the darkening windshield. I was a shell. I had performed the ultimate duty of a parent, making myself obsolete. What was left for me now? A calendar full of white space? A dinner table set for 2? The silence was waiting for me, and I was driving straight toward it, not sure if I would survive the impact. For days, I moved through the house like a ghost. I'd wander into Chloe's room and just stand there, breathing in the fading scent of her. I avoided the grocery store aisles that held her favorite snacks. The world had lost its color. David tried to help, suggesting we take up gardening or finally plan that trip to Vermont. But it all felt like busy work, a distraction from the gaping hole in our lives. One rainy Tuesday, a week after we'd returned, I was feeling particularly low. The silence was so oppressive it felt like a physical weight. In a desperate attempt to feel close to Chloe, I decided to finally tackle the one thing I'd been avoiding: the box of old family videos David had digitized years ago and saved on a hard drive. I plugged it into the computer, my cursor hovering over a folder marked Chloe, age 5. I was seeking comfort, a hit of nostalgia to dull the pain. But what I found in those flickering images wasn't just a memory of my daughter's childhood, it was a message, a shocking and profound revelation, not about her, but about me. The screen lit up, and there she was, 5 years old, with 2 missing front teeth, riding a bike with training wheels in the driveway. David's voice was behind the camera. "You're doing it, kiddo! You're a natural!" And then the camera panned to me. I was standing off to the side, one hand clutched to my chest, my face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "Be careful, David. Don't let her go too fast. Maybe that's enough for today," my younger self called out, her voice tight with anxiety. I fast-forwarded. Chloe, at 8, in a school play as a talking tree. She was beaming, belting out her one line with gusto. The camera found me in the audience, but I wasn't watching her. I was rummaging through my purse, a worried frown on my face, probably checking I had the emergency Band-Aids and wet wipes. Another clip. Her first middle school dance. She was in a new dress, looking so grown up. "Mom, do I look okay?" she asked, her voice shy. And on the screen, I fussed with the strap of her dress. "It's a little crooked, honey. And are you sure you'll be warm enough? Maybe a sweater." I clicked off the video, my heart pounding. This wasn't the warm, fuzzy trip down memory lane I'd expected. I was watching a documentary of a woman consumed by worry, a woman who thought love was synonymous with vigilance, a woman who saw danger and disappointment lurking around every corner. I had been so busy trying to build a safe, perfect world for Chloe that I had forgotten to show her how to be brave within it. The fear I saw in her eyes during our farewell wasn't just about college. It was a reflection of the fear she had learned from me. It was a gut-wrenching, horrifying, and utterly surprising epiphany. My motherhood, which I had worn as a badge of honor, had also been a cage for both of us. I had to follow my daughter's emotional farewell not just to her new life, but to the truth about my own. The cliffhanger wasn't what would happen to her out in the world, it was what would become of me now that my oldest, most defining role had been based on a flawed script. Could I rewrite it? That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of my younger self was burned onto the back of my eyelids. I thought about my own mother, how she'd waved me off when I moved in with David, a stoic smile on her face. Had she felt this? Had she hidden her own earthquake behind a calm facade? I got out of bed and went to the living room, the moonlight painting silver stripes on the floor. I opened my laptop, not to watch more videos, but to write. I started a new email to Chloe. I didn't want to be the source of her anxiety anymore. I wanted to be her champion. And that started with being honest. I began to type, my fingers flying across the keys, telling her about my discovery, my regret, and my new fierce determination to not just be a memory she looked back on, but a fellow traveler on her journey, one who was finally learning to be brave herself. I told her I was starting a new project, something just for me, something that terrified me. I was going to finally write that book I'd always talked about. I hit send as the sun was rising, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not just the absence of pain, but the presence of hope.